Okay, let's talk about things we just know. Like, gravity exists, dogs are great, and Velcro. Everyone knows Velcro was invented by NASA during the space race.
Right. Hmm.
It feels like such a quintessential part of that whole era, you know? Spacesuits keeping things from floating away?
It absolutely does. The visual is so powerful. You picture astronauts, space shuttles, everything neatly secured in zero-G, and it's covered in those familiar strips. That connection feels incredibly natural,
Yeah.
almost obvious, really.
Yeah.
It fits that narrative perfectly, you know?
Yeah.
Cutting-edge tech, born out of necessity for space travel.
Exactly. You see it used so much in those iconic images, whether it's like fastening equipment or just keeping a pen from drifting off.
Hmm.
It's easy to assume this was some brilliant invention born in a high-tech lab,
Mm.
specifically designed to solve problems you only get in space. It's
Right.
a really compelling story, ties into that whole time of huge innovation.
And because that story is so compelling, so neat, it's become widely accepted as fact. But, well, as fascinating as that popular idea is, the truth about where Velcro came from, it's actually quite different.
Which is precisely why we're here doing this deep dive. We're going to look closely at this everyday fastener, this thing that seems so tied to space, and figure out its actual origins. Like,
Yeah.
what was the real spark? When did it really happen? And if NASA didn't invent it, what was their role?
Exactly. Our goal here is to unpack this widely believed story for you, the listener, and reveal the surprising truth behind it, and explore not just the real origin, but also dig into why the myth became so persistent.
Right.
And honestly, I think the real story is just as fascinating, maybe even more so than the one about space labs.
Okay, so let's lay out the myth first, just as it exists in popular culture. The dominant narrative goes something like this. Velcro. Created by NASA engineers, maybe sometime in the 60s?
Mm, 60.
Probably for, like, the Apollo missions. A direct result of the big tech push from the space race.
That's the classic version, yeah. And like we said, the reasons it feels so real are strong. Seeing it just plastered all over astronaut gear, inside the spacecraft cabins, holding down critical equipment. It just looks like it was designed for that environment.
Totally.
It screams space-age technology, doesn't it? Fits perfectly into the public imagination of 1960s innovation.
It aligns perfectly with that image, you know? America pouring resources into brilliant scientists and engineers, tasking them with inventing whatever was necessary to get to the moon.
Right.
So you naturally assume something so practical and effective in that unique environment must have been born there,
Yep.
specifically to overcome the challenges of, well, microgravity.
And that assumption, while completely understandable given how much they used it and when
Yeah.
it got famous, that's where the myth kind of splits from reality.
Ah.
That compelling belief, it's not where Velcro started.
Okay. All right. Prepare yourself, listener, because the reality is far more grounded, quite literally.
Indeed. The truth is, Velcro was not invented by NASA, and it didn't emerge from the space race era at all.
So no lab coats, no countdowns, no zero gravity involved at the moment of creation.
Nope, absolutely not. The real inventor was a Swiss electrical engineer. His name was George de Mestral.
George de Mestral. Okay.
And the actual invention date, get this, 1941.
1941. Wow. Okay, that's like 2 decades before the peak of the space race. That's a huge shift in the timeline.
It really is.
So how did an electrical engineer in Switzerland back in the early 40s come up with something we now link so strongly to space travel?
Okay, this is where the story gets really charming. It's a classic tale of, like, accidental inspiration meeting a really curious mind.
Mm-hmm.
De Mestral was out walking in the Alps with his dog. After their walk, he noticed, like anyone would, how annoyingly stubborn these little burrs were.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the prickly little seed pods from the burdock plant.
Oh, yeah, those
They were
annoying.
sticking like crazy to his dog's fur and his own tweed trouser.
Oh, the absolute bane of hikers and dog owners everywhere. We've all been there.
Right. Most people would just frustratingly pick them off and, curse them. But de Mestral, his engineering mind kicked in. He didn't just get annoyed, he got intensely curious.
Okay.
He actually took some of those burrs back home with him.
Yeah.
And decided to examine them under a microscope.
And what did he see? Was it just sticky?
That was the aha moment. Under magnification, he saw the burrs weren't just, like, randomly sticking. They were covered in hundreds of tiny, stiff hooks.
Hooks.
Yeah, tiny hooks. And these hooks were effectively latching on to the microscopic loops and fibers in his dog's fur and his own fabric.
Wow. So it wasn't just stickiness, it was a mechanical thing. Tiny hooks physically grabbing tiny loops.
Precisely. He saw this ingenious natural fastening system right there in this annoying plant and thought, huh, could I replicate this? That simple observation sparked the whole idea.
Turning that observation, though, into a usable product, that sounds like a massive engineering challenge. You can't just, like, glue tiny plant hooks onto fabric, right?
Exactly right. It wasn't a quick leap at all. From that observation to invention, it led to years, literally years, of dedicated experimentation.
Okay.
He had to figure out how to manufacture both sides, the hook side and a loop side, using man-made materials, like nylon, making them durable, reliable, and, crucially, capable of being fastened as unfastened over and over again.
All right, that's key.
He experimented with different materials, different ways of weaving them, just trying to perfect the system. It was a long, iterative process.
So trial and error based on that initial walk in the Alps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 1955, so, over a decade after the initial idea, after years of refining the manufacturing process, that he finally patented his invention.
1955. Wow. Okay.
And the name he chose, it gives a nice nod to its construction.
Ah, Velcro.
Right.
What's the story behind the name itself?
He coined Velcro by combining two French words, velour, which means velvet.
Okay, the soft side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Representing the soft, fuzzy, looped side. And crochet, which means hook.
Ah, the hook side. Makes sense.
Obvious, right. Velvet hook. Velcro. Velcro.
Brilliant. So, okay, recap. Swiss engineer Georges de Mestral. Inspired by burrs on his dog, 1941. Years of work, patent in 1955, named after French words. The NASA invention story is, well, it's nowhere in sight there.
Yep.
So where does NASA actually fit into all this? Because they clearly did use it a lot.
Their role was absolutely critical, yes, but it was one of adoption and, crucially, popularization, not invention.
They were basically huge customers, maybe the most famous customer.
Precisely. NASA discovered Velcro and adopted it extensively, particularly as the Apollo program really ramped up in the 1960s. Just think about the environment they were working in microgravity.
Everything floats.
Everything floats. You need simple, effective ways to keep things exactly where you need them, whether it's a tool, a food pouch, equipment on a control panel, anything.
And Velcro would have been perfect for that. Lightweight, reliable, easy to use, even if you're wearing those big, bulky gloves.
Exactly.
You could quickly attach and detach stuff without needing fiddly latches or complex mechanisms.
It was invaluable. Seriously, they used it everywhere. Securing tools, map holders, cameras, food trays, personal items, even for attaching bits of equipment to the spacesuits themselves. Its practicality in that unique environment was it was unmatched by other fasteners at the time.
And because NASA was the most visible, most high-profile scientific and engineering project in the world at that moment,
The whole world watched it.
the whole world was watching the race to the moon. So
Yeah.
anything they used got immense public attention. And it just seemed incredibly high-tech because, well, it was NASA using it.
Exactly right. NASA's widespread and very public use of Velcro, shown in countless photos, documentaries, news reports, that directly contributed to its surge in popularity. People saw it being used by astronauts heading to the moon and naturally associated it with cutting-edge space technology.
Ah.
And that's precisely how the misconception about its origin really took hold and spread like wildfire.
So NASA's genius wasn't inventing Velcro itself, it was recognizing how incredibly useful it was in an extreme environment. And basically showcasing it to the entire planet, kind of inadvertently creating the myth along the way. They were the ultimate high-profile early inventors.
That's a great way to put it. Their adoption was a massive catalyst for Velcro's success and public recognition, definitely. But the invention itself totally predates their involvement and came from, well, a walk in the woods, a very different place.
Okay, this still begs a question, though. If the real story is a walk in the Alps, why does the NASA myth persist so strongly? Even today, lots of people would swear NASA invented it.
That's a fascinating case study, isn't it? How myths take root and just stick. There are several key reasons, and they draw directly from what we've just been talking about.
I bet the first one is just that visual association we mentioned right at the start.
Without a doubt. Number one reason, probably. It's everywhere on the space gear. Seeing it so prominently displayed on something as iconic as an astronaut's spacesuit creates an incredibly strong mental link.
Yeah.
It just looks like it belongs to that world, Makes the origin story feel intuitively correct.
And the timing. You mentioned the timing was critical.
Absolutely crucial.
Velcro
It became widely known, commercially successful, right during the peak of the public's fascination with space travel,
right.
1960s.
Right.
Anything associated with space back then was exciting. It was newsworthy.
Yeah.
So Velcro just caught that wave.
And the media just ran with that connection, didn't they?
Oh, for decades. From those early news reports showing astronauts using Velcro to stop things floating away, to later documentaries, sci-fi movies, even toy packaging. Pop culture consistently reinforced that link. Velcro equals space.
And let's be honest, invented because a guy saw burrs on his dog after a hike isn't quite as glamorous as invented by rocket scientists at NASA to go to the moon.
That's a significant factor, yeah. There's a certain allure, isn't there? The whole space cells idea. Associating a product with space exploration, it just makes it sound more innovative, more advanced, maybe even futuristic. It was probably a subtle boost, maybe unintentional at first, but it's became deeply ingrained in how people thought about Velcro.
So it was a combination then. Genuine usefulness in space, the super high visibility of the space program, perfectly timed public interest, how the media portrayed it, and maybe just that natural human tendency to gravitate towards the more dramatic, high-tech narrative.
A perfect storm.
Yeah.
A perfect recipe for a really persistent misconception. It just got woven into the fabric of the space race story in people's minds and stayed there.
So why does it matter that we get the story straight? I mean, it's just a fastener, right? Does knowing the real origin actually change anything?
I think it matters quite a lot. Understanding the true origin of Velcro isn't just about correcting a historical footnote, you know.
Okay.
It's a really powerful reminder of the importance of simple things. Observation, curiosity, persistence. Think about it. Someone noticed something that most of us would just dismiss as annoying burrs sticking to clothes, and instead saw an elegant design principle right there in nature.
It's a fantastic example of biomimicry, isn't it? Looking to nature for solutions to human problems.
It really is. Nature has spent millions of years perfecting designs, and often the most ingenious solutions are just right there, waiting for us to notice them. The Mestral story contrasts so beautifully with that image of innovation only happening in massive, expensive labs or big government programs.
Right.
It shows invention can come from a walk in the woods, from a curious individual, through patient experimentation year after year.
It brings the whole story of technological progress back down to a very human, very relatable level, actually.
Exactly. And it connects to a broader appreciation for the diverse path that innovation can take. Understanding where things actually come from gives credit, where it's due, to the inventor, George de Mestral, to the natural world that inspired him, and yes, also to the organizations like NASA who adopted and popularized it later. But it clarifies each role. It enhances our understanding of how technology evolves and becomes part of our everyday lives.
It definitely makes you look at everyday objects a bit differently. This little strip that holds your jacket closed or keeps your cables tidy wasn't cooked up for astronauts floating around after all.
Nope. It was inspired by a walk in the mountains, a close look at a bothersome little plant seed, and years of hard work just trying to replicate nature's design. It's really a marvel of elegant simplicity and function born right here on Earth.
So connecting this back to you, the listener, the story of Velcro's origin, while it's very earthbound, it's absolutely no less remarkable than the space myth, maybe even more so. It's a testament to the power of just observing and drawing inspiration from the world right around us.
Yeah, the next time you encounter Velcro, maybe on a shoe strap or holding a remote to the wall, just take a moment. Remember George de Mestral, his dog, those burrs in the Alps, and the ingenious little design he uncovered.
It's a great reminder, isn't it, to maybe question the assumptions you might have about where everyday things come from. Sometimes the most ubiquitous, most innovative solutions have surprisingly simple, really unexpected origins.
Absolutely. And, if this deep dive into the surprising origins of everyday tech has maybe sparked your curiosity about space, given that's where the myth took us. Anyway, there are some fantastic resources available out there.
Oh, yeah.
For instance, the information we looked at mentioned things like free and premium courses taught by actual experts in space and astronomy.
Right.
Apparently, you can find those at SpaceInfo.clublearn.
Oh, cool. SpaceInfo.clublearn. Good to know. A great way to keep exploring fascinating topics. So keep questioning, keep looking closely at the world around you, and keep diving deep into the stories behind the things we often take for granted. You never know what surprising truth you'll uncover next.